Legendary Pokemon are some of the most iconic in the entire franchise. Is exactly how I started my last video asking what the best legendary of all time actually is. But despite having some of the highest stats, strongest abilities, and craziest signature moves in the entire game, the only thing legendary about some legendaries is how completely terrible they are. So I was curious, just like some of you were in the comments of that video. Just what is the worst legendary of all time? And leading up to that answer, what is the worst legendary from each generation? But first, some rules. Mythical legendaries, which are the category of legendaries usually exclusive to special events, are always banned from official tournaments, so I'm not going to be considering any of them for this video. Also, I know I put it in the thumbnail, but Nebby is super cute and doesn't deserve to be on a list like this. So I'm also going to be excluding pre-evolutions as well. And last, Pokemon like Calyrex, Necrozma, Kyurem, this isn't even their final form, so I won't be including them either. Kyurem Black, though, might not be so lucky. Alright, with that out of the way, it's time to give you guys my science-backed world champion opinions, starting with Generation 1. So, a lot of you who watched my last video on the fall of Pokemon's most iconic legendary might be expecting Mewtwo to take the crown here. Actually, calling it a crown makes it sound like it's a good thing, but you guys know what I mean. Anyway, Mewtwo used to be really good, and even as recently as Sun and Moon, put up some decent results in major official tournaments. But the cream of the crop this generation actually goes to Moltres. While its Galarian form, introduced in Sword and Shield, has actually been pretty good since its release, Moltres in its OG Cantonian form has mostly been pretty bad. It finished runner-up at the World Championship way back in 2009 on what is one of the most bizarre teams I've ever seen, but that's a topic for a different video. In more modern competitive play, Moltres has only had a single good finish in the last 10 years, where World Champion Paul Ruiz took it to a top 4 finish at the 2018 International Championships. And how Paul used it made a ton of sense. Not only could it support Paul's Kyogre with Tailwind, but what's really unique is that it's a fire type that actually benefits from Kyogre's rain, thanks to the move Hurricane, an incredibly strong move whose lone drawback gets completely washed away. However, it never came close to repeating this success. So rather than this result being a testament to Moltres being good, it may have just been the world champ difference. Either way, while it may be the worst of Generation 1, it's probably not in contention for the worst legendary of all time. Moving on to Gen 2, let's talk about Lugia. But before that, I want to tell you guys about Arena Club auctions. So one of the things I've been trying to do recently is collect every Pokemon I won Worlds with, but their trading card with my favorite art. And my go-to place for trying to get some of the more rare cards has been Arena Club auctions. I actually used to buy a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh cards via auctions when I was younger in order to try and get them at more affordable prices. But unfortunately, on some of the platforms I used to use, that sometimes came with a price. But backed by Hall of Famer Derek Jeter, with Arena Club auctions, there's no buyer's premium and no hidden costs. What you bid is what you pay. And all listings are graded cards, with no shill bids and no bots upping the price either. Some of the cards I've personally been chasing are pretty rare, so I've been eyeing some of Arena Club Auction's Pokemon card listings as my go-to choice, as I try and complete my collection of all my World's winning Pokemon. So whether you're chasing something rare or looking to offload your latest pull, Arena Club Auctions is where collectors win. Go and check out which featured auctions are trending right now at arenaclub.com/RayRizzo. That's arenaclub.com/RayRizzo. Thanks again to Arena Club for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to Lugia. Now, Lugia did finish runner-up to yours truly at the World Championship way back in 2010, but it's been downhill for it ever since. However, it's not as washed up as I am, cause it's actually seen some play in Scarlet and Violet, utilizing its insane natural bulk, Calm Mind to turn it into a raid boss, and Recover paired with its multi-scale ability to make it nearly unkillable. The problem is it has base offensive stats of 90. That's just pathetic for a restricted legendary. So good luck trying to set up enough Calm Minds to actually do damage when you're staring down Pokemon like Calyrex Shadow Rider, Ice Rider, and Miraidon. But the fact that Lugia still gets used even now, and had a few top 64 finishes recently at major regional championships, means it's not as bad as the worst Gen 2 legendary, Raikou. Now, Raikou is pretty fast, does decent damage, and can support the team with Reflect and Light Screen, all while keeping opponent's speed under control with moves like Thunder Wave or Electro Web. And this is going to be a recurring theme here, but the release of Tapu Koko followed immediately by the release of Regieleki just made it completely outclassed. They're faster, do more damage, and can provide the same level of support. It's pure power creep. But Gen 3 gave us a legendary that very much isn't a victim of power creep. And that's because this is the list of Regiice's official tournament results. Now, Ice is one of, if not the best, offensive type in the entire game. The trade-off is it's one of the worst defensively. And how were Regiice's stats distributed? Slow and bulky, with a mediocre special attack, the exact opposite of how an Ice type wants to be played. And if you saw my video on the problems with the Rock type, I talked a lot about the similarity between these two types, which is why Regirock was also in contention here. But it's actually put up a couple decent results over the years, and really had a niche in Sword and Shield, where its clear body ability paired with the weakness policy made it a strong Dynamax attacker. And with Pokemon Champions promising to bring back all the old generational mechanics, maybe Regirock makes a return to competitive relevance again soon. But maybe Regiice has some hope too. I mean, Articuno would have been the worst Gen 1 legendary if I made this video a year ago, because it's also a bulky Ice type with mediocre special attack, yet it still managed to become a major threat in Scarlet and Violet and even won a regional championship, so maybe anything's possible. Unfortunately, I don't think anything's possible for some of Generation 4's legendaries. Giratina, in both its forms really, is pretty bad. As Game Freak's released stronger and stronger restricted legendaries over the years, Giratina's mediocre speed and attacking stats just haven't kept up. It used to be good back when Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum were the latest generation, so that keeps it safe for now. Similarly, Azelf is terrible nowadays, but it also used to be good in Generation 4, back when its speed and attacking stats were actually good. It also learned what was the most broken move in the entire game, Explosion. But ever since Explosion got nerfed, having its damage cut in half, Azelf was never really seen again. Mesprit, though, is even worse. Unlike Azelf and Giratina, Mesprit was never good. But it managed to save itself from taking the top spot this gen because of a top 16 finish it just got at a regional championship like 2 months ago. And to be honest, I don't even know how because this Pokemon is complete garbage. But that one result is enough to keep it from overtaking Uxie as the worst legendary of Generation 4. There is literally nothing going for this Pokemon. It is just a worse Cresselia in every way. They have the same typing, the same ability, learn basically all the same moves, have the same special attack, all while Cresselia is much bulkier even after it had its stats nerfed. And Cresselia even gets an amazing signature move that heals both itself as well as its allies' HP and status conditions. There's just no reason to ever use Uxie. The only niche for it I've been able to think of in the 20 years since Uxie was released was like using Memento, which is one of its only usable moves that Cresselia doesn't also learn, all in order to give you a window to like set up a belly drum with something like Snorlax to try and sweep. But needless to say, Uxie has never won anything and probably never will. But is Uxie the worst legendary of all time? Well, half the generations still remain, and let me tell you, some of Generation 5's legendaries are just as useless. Starting with Tornadus Therian and Kyurem Black. These Pokemon have barely gotten any usage at official tournaments in their entire history, let alone top finishes. But there's only one thing holding them back from being good, which keeps them from being the worst legendary of the generation. And that's a single press of the A button on a key item. Because Tornadus Incarnate is one of the most successful Pokemon of all time, in large part thanks to its broken prankster ability. But by changing to its Therian form, it loses the prankster ability. Needless to say, that makes it completely unusable, because you're just always better off using Tornadus Incarnate instead. And Kyurem Black is similar. It has identical stats and typing as Kyurem White, but it gets Zekrom's signature move as it's a physical attacker, while Kyurem White gets Reshiram's signature move as it's a special attacker. But unfortunately, Incineroar is everywhere, so physical attackers are inherently at a major disadvantage in competitive Pokemon. With that said, there are tools like the Clear Amulet in order to get around Intimidate, but if you want a physical attacking Ice type, you're usually just better off with Calyrex Ice Rider. Kyurem White, on the other hand, while it's never been one of the top restricted legendaries, has actually had a number of pretty good finishes at major official tournaments, especially as a Dynamax attacker in Sword and Shield. And that was before Hail got reworked into Snow, so in theory it should only be better now once Pokemon Champions comes out and we inevitably get Dynamax back once again. So, since neither of these two are getting the title of Worst Legendary of Generation 5, only on a technicality really, because Tornadus Therian form definitely deserves it, the Pokemon I'm gonna give it to instead has no easy cop-out. And to maybe some of your surprise, it's not Cobalion, because it's actually put up a few decent results, including as recently as last year's Japanese National Championship, where it finished in 9th. Its access to Wide Guard let it block a bunch of restricted legendary's best moves, and it could do big damage to normal and dark types with Body Press, coming off its really good defense stat. It was basically Temu Zamazenta that could be paired with Calyrex Shadow Rider in a single restricted legendary format. So I might get a lot of you disagreeing with me in the comments for this, but I'm gonna say the worst legendary of the generation is actually Zekrom. The only decent result in its entire history is a top 64 finish at the 2022 World Championship, where it made a decent Dynamax attacker. But it's only gotten worse since then. See, on the surface, Zekrom isn't even all that bad. It has a pretty good typing, especially in formats where Kyogre's everywhere, it's got decent bulk, and an attack stat as high as Groudon's. Not to mention, its move pool contains a good mix of strong attacks, setup moves, and even supportive moves. The problem is that it wasn't even very good before, but now in Scarlet and Violet, Game Freak released another Electric and Dragon type, but made it faster, stronger, and even just as bulky. Miraidon is just a pure upgrade. And similar to Kyurem Black versus Kyurem White, Miraidon is a special attacker, so that inherently makes it much tougher to play against, as we don't yet have a version of Burn or Intimidate for slowing down special attackers. So until that happens, Zekrom is just completely outclassed, and there's no reason to ever use it instead of Miraidon. Next up is Gen 6, and like Gen 5, this one's also kinda because of a technicality. Only this time, it's more like there's only 3 legendaries to choose from this gen, and none of them are actually bad. Which is why, unfortunately, Z-Guard gets the title this gen. And before any of you comment about how I have to be pronouncing Pokemon like Yveltal or Z-Guard wrong on purpose, well, yeah, you're right. That is, until I was doing research for this video and saw Z-Guard's name in Japanese for the first time, and it's actually called Z-Guard, so maybe I was the one getting trolled all along. Anyway, Z-Guard is pretty terrible on the surface for a restricted legendary. Weaknesses to Dragon and Fairy, as well as a 4x weakness to Ice, is pretty bad when so many restricted legendaries use attacks of those types. And then we get to its stats, and let's just say it makes Terapagos look good. And just to clarify, I'm talking about the turtle form, not the Terastal form. Actually, I guess there's 2 turtle forms, so I mean the pancake turtle form, not the cute turtle form. But with a base stat total of 600, it's on par with normal legendaries and pseudo-legendaries, not the broken restricted ones on the covers of games. And when you break down its stats, they're not even distributed well. Its base 100 attack puts it on the same level as Lechonk's Evolution, whose name I don't even remember, and its base 95 speed stat is fine, but nothing crazy to make up for that mediocre attack stat. But when Z-Guard falls below half HP, it gets to go Super Saiyan, and turns into a Gundam-looking raid boss, increasing its HP to Blissey levels. But its mediocre attack stat, well, that stays the same, and its average speed stat, well, that actually gets worse after its transformation. However, Z-Guard has managed a bunch of top 8 finishes at official regional championships during the Sun and Moon era. Its basic strategy was to increase its attack and defense with the move Coil, then, after it gets a few boosts, transform into its ultimate life form and start firing off really strong 1000 arrows, which not only hit both opponents, but even hit levitators and flying types. It was also able to learn extreme speed as a way to bypass its mediocre speed stat and hit opponents before they can even attack. Of course, it's not legal in Scarlet and Violet, so we have no idea how it would have fared with the terastallization mechanic. But hopefully Pokemon Champions will change that. Although, I guess by then, it'll probably have some new Mega Evolution from Legend ZA that makes it absolutely broken, so maybe I'll regret wishing for that. And speaking of regret, that's what Game Freak should be feeling when looking back on some of their god-awful legendaries in Generation 7. But I will say, to me, these are some of the coolest in the entire franchise. And that's because Ultra Beasts and Silvally are apparently considered legendaries. I actually enjoyed the Ultra Beast storyline personally, and I'd love to see a Legends game made that focuses on all those alternate worlds we only slightly got to explore during Sun and Moon. But this video is about competitive Pokemon, and my god, are some of them downright awful. Let's start with Silvally since I already spoiled it, but this thing is not good. Base 95 stats across the board seems fine, but in reality, for Pokemon to succeed in competitive play, they really need to be great at something. Silvally though is great at nothing. The one time it found some success was in 2017, where players were limited to only the Pokemon found in Sun and Moon's Pokedex. This much more limited rule set meant that Pokemon with even mediocre stats were actually usable. To give some perspective, this format saw Pokemon like Golduck, Muck, and Persian as actual top Pokemon. And even then, it's not like Silvally was actually good. It just managed to get a top 8 finish at a regional championship, so I guess that's something. As for the Ultra Beast, Blacephalon was added in Ultra Sun and Moon, which meant that it immediately had to compete in a format with legendaries and mega evolutions rather than the lower power level format that Silvally got to. But it wasn't completely terrible, because Blacephalon had a clear niche. It was a really powerful fast attacker with the trade-off of horrible defenses, which was only compounded thanks to its signature move. Mind Blown is an incredibly powerful 150 base power move that hits every other Pokemon on the field, followed by Blacephalon itself losing half its total HP. It's clearly a Pokemon with a huge risk, but an equally big reward, because when paired with Mega Charizard Y to set up the sun for it, as well as Pokemon like Heatran or Musharna who were immune to Mind Blown, Blacephalon managed to reach 2nd place and 4th place at 2 different regional level championships. I sound like I'm hyping it up here, but it's still pretty far and away one of the worst Ultra Beasts. But since it did put up some decent results, I'll go ahead and hold myself back from calling it garbage, because that title belongs to the Garbage King, Guzzlord. Guzzlord's slow with mediocre attacking stats, its defense stat is lower than Magikarp's, and its special defense is lower than Ekans. Its massive HP does somewhat make up for these awful defenses, but it's still only comparable defensively to things like Regidrago, Cetitan, and Wailord. Not exactly Pokemon you think of as super tanks. Guzzlord does get some good support moves though, Wide Guard, Knockoff, and even Snarl. But its typing lends itself more towards being an offensive Pokemon, a la Hydreigon, because Dark Dragon has 5 weaknesses, one of which is a 4x weakness, so even Guzzlord's massive HP stat really isn't saving it. Now, Guzzlord did manage a top 8 finish that same year Silvally did. And I remember when this happened at the time and I couldn't believe it then. And honestly, I still can't believe it even now, because it somehow managed to do it on an Ultra Beast only team. Now, how much work Guzzlord put in, or how often it was even chosen as one of the 4 Pokemon for battle, I have no idea. But hey, you can't argue with a top 8 finish. What you can argue with though, is that was its only notable finish in its entire history. So this generation's trash legendary is fittingly Guzzlord. Now, Generation 8 didn't give us any truly terrible legendaries, but when you look at the context that this generation gave us some of the most broken legendary Pokemon ever, it's hard to look at a couple of them as anything but major disappointments. Eternatus is one of those, but again, it's really not that bad. It has good stats with a good typing, it's just held back by 2 things. One is the lack of a good spread move to hit both opponents. I mean, most of the best restricted legendaries get one. Astral Barrage, Glacial Lance, Water Spout, Precipice Blades, Terra Starstorm, heck, even Miraidon with a much weaker Dazzling Gleam becomes a huge threat with Terra Fairy. Eternatus gets Sludge Wave as its best, which isn't even comparable. The second problem is its ability, because when it comes to restricted legendaries, having an ability that effectively does nothing is just not good enough, especially when you have others with equally good stats, move pools, and typings, but they have absolutely insane abilities. And look at all the other restricted legendaries that have pressure. They've all been given an additional ability later on. So if Eternatus gets one too, that could make it a lot better. Anyway, it's just my honorable mention because the worst legendary is Enamorus. Every single one of the other genies has at some point been one of, if not the best Pokemon in the entire game. This trio was without a doubt the strongest trio of legendaries Game Freak ever made. So, when Enamorus was first introduced, a lot of us competitive players had really high expectations for it. But it's safe to say at this point, Enamorus didn't come close to meeting them. Its Therian form has definitely been the better of the 2 forms though. It was clearly designed as a Trick Room attacker, which in theory it actually seems quite good for. It has a really good special attack, and Fairy is a good type to be attacking with. I mean, just look at Fluttermane, who has identical special attack. Enamorus also gets coverage moves to hit the Steel, Fire, and Poison types that resist its Fairy moves. And when you think about Trick Room counters, the most common one has to be Amoonguss. But Enamorus, though, is immune to Spore and Rage Powder thanks to its ability, so it seems like the perfect Trick Room attacker. But it just didn't play out that way. While it came close a few times, Enamorus has never managed a top 8 finish at a major official tournament. And Enamorus Incarnate is even worse. Unlike its Therian form, the Incarnate form hasn't even come close to a good tournament finish. Its ability, Contrary, does have the potential to be really strong, but Enamorus just doesn't have the moves or the defensive stats to take advantage of it. Because none of its Fairy or Flying type moves synergize with it, and its only good move that does is Superpower. But when you look at its stats, it's clearly not a bulky physical attacker. So this generation's worst legendary definitely goes to Enamorus. Alright, our last generation, Gen 9, has a couple really awful legendaries to choose from. Now first, I'm not going to count the Paradox Pokemon as legendaries. Pokemon doesn't officially consider them as legendaries, and they don't really feel legendary to me either, since you can catch a bunch of them in your game as if they're regular old Pokemon. So Slitherwing and Iron Thorns are safe for now. But you know, for the almost 20 years I've been around the competitive Pokemon scene, I never thought we'd see a trio as bad as Diamond and Pearl's Lake Trio ever again. But boy was I wrong, because Scarlet and Violet Steel Mask DLC gave us some of the worst legendary Pokemon of all time. Let's start with Pheasantipiti. Its Poison and Fairy dual typing is actually pretty good. We've seen Galarian and Weezing have success with the exact same typing, and in terms of stats, it's even bulkier than Weezing. But the downside is its extremely mediocre attacking stats. On paper though, its two abilities are there to make up for it. Toxic Chain gives each of Pheasantipiti's moves a chance to badly poison the opponent, which would then add additional damage at the end of each turn. But it's only a 30% chance to activate, so not exactly reliable. Pheasantipiti's other ability is Technician, which is a great ability, but only when the Pokemon learns moves that can make use of it. Think of low base power priority moves like Bullet Punch or Mach Punch, or moves that have low base power but hit multiple times, like Population Bomb or Bullet Seed. Pheasantipiti, though, doesn't learn anything to take advantage of Technician, so it's pretty much forced to be a support while you pray for poisons with Toxic Chain. Now, it does learn a couple good supportive moves, especially to control the speed of the battle. Icy Wind goes really well with Toxic Chain since it triggers a chance for it to activate on both opponents, giving you a higher chance of actually poisoning something. But when speed control is really the only supporting it's doing, and its ability to spread poison is inconsistent at best, you're better off either using a Pokemon like Whimsicott or Tornadus for more reliable speed control, or a Pokemon like Glimmora or Weezing to more reliably spread poison across your opponent's team. If Pheasantipiti were just a normal, non-legendary Pokemon, I mean, base stat-wise, it has the exact same total stats as Arcanine, then it could maybe be viable in a lower power level format. But since it's a legendary, it'll only ever be allowed when other high-powered legendaries are also legal, so it's just been doomed from the start. However, there's an argument to be made that another member of this god-awful trio is even worse, Munkidori. To start, Poison and Psychic is a terrible typing. Stat-wise, it's fast, but not as fast as some of the other commonly used high-statted Pokemon. It's strong, but that's where its typing comes back to bite it. Neither Psychic nor Poison can hit Steel types, and Steel is an extremely common type in competitive Pokemon. And does Munkidori learn any moves to hit Steel types? Well, there's Focus Blast, but good luck actually hitting with it. And then on top of its coverage problems, it doesn't even really threaten big damage to non-Steel types, because its only special attacking Poison or Psychic type move above 100 base power is Future Sight. And I didn't even know that had more than 100 base power until doing this video, because no one actually uses that garbage move. It also doesn't learn any powerful spread moves except the mediocre Sludge Wave. Munkidori does actually get a pair of really good supportive moves that might remind you of someone, but unfortunately, it's not bulky enough to actually make use of them. As for Munkidori's abilities, well, they surely aren't saving it. The same unreliable Toxic Chain ability is even worse on Munkidori since it'll get knocked out before it can roll the dice enough to poison opposing Pokemon, and its other ability, Frisk, is mostly useless. It is somewhat useful in online play where you don't know your opponent's held items. But when playing in official in-person tournaments, both you and your opponent have to share each Pokemon's moves, abilities, Terra types, and yep, even held items before the match even starts. I think if Monkidori were given a spread move like Expanding Force, an actual good coverage move to hit steel types with, and a much more useful ability than Frisk, then it could maybe become usable. But until that actually happens, I'm gonna say Monkidori is the worst legendary of Generation 9. So which of these legendaries is the worst of all? Well, being completely outclassed by a Pokemon with the same or outright better stats, typing, ability, and moves, and even if you deleted that better Pokemon from the game, this doo-doo Pokemon still wouldn't be good, then I think the answer has to be Uxie. Before you go, don't forget to check out Arena Club Auctions at arenaclub.com/RayRizzo, because Arena Club Auctions is where collectors win.